could do a top 10 or even a top 20, but I said, you know what? I want to talk 30 movies today. So that's what we're going to do. What is up, flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. This is it. This is the culmination of what it's all been leading to. All right, see you later. Nope, just kidding. Today I'm giving you guys my top 30 movies of all time. This is a list I have shuffled and moved and I've edited. Even last night I was up going, should I put this movie at number 10 and this one at number 9? I don't know. So it will most likely continue to alter as I rewatch films. If you guys would like to keep up with this list, I will be putting this on Letterboxd later in the week, and every time I change a movie, you will be the first ones to see it, and eventually I will get to a top 100 list that I plan on doing on this channel, but that's the future. Today we're focusing on my top 30, and over the next couple of weeks I'm going to be giving you guys my favorite heroes, villains, moments, scenes. I have a lot of videos planned on the all-time scale, but this video is my favorite movies. Now, the distinction between best and favorite is a very difficult one. I like to factor in how good a movie is, but a lot of this plays in nostalgia, how many times I've watched a film, the level that I appreciate them, and of course, you guys know I'm a blockbuster fan, I'm a superhero fan, so those are going to be on here. If you don't like superhero films, I mean, it's my favorite, so what are you going to do? But that's the thing. I want to see how different your all's lists are, so please comment your thoughts below, and if you enjoy this series that I'm going to keep doing over the next couple of weeks, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. Let me know you would like to see more. But I don't want to talk too much during the intro because it's going to be a long video. So let's get right into it. No honorable mentions. Of course, the honorable mentions are on the channel. That was yesterday's video. I talked 30 movies yesterday and 30 movies today. My goodness. First up is David Fincher's Fight Club. Had to put a Fincher movie on this list, and everyone knows the number one rule. You do not talk about Fight Club, and that's the only thing that my wife knew about this movie the other day when we went back. I was watching it again. She was watching it for the first time, and she was just mesmerized by the experience. She probably didn't like it as much as I do, but it's one of those films, the first time you watch it, you will always remember your experience. It is so interesting the way that David Fincher kind of portrays Norton's character, and we dive deep into his psyche and the obvious connection between he and Brad Pitt. And I know this is an older movie, but I don't want to spoil too many things because the shock on her face when she experienced the twist for the first time was hilarious, especially, 21 years later? So Fight Club is one of those films. You will always remember where you were the first time you watched it. Love it or hate it, and I think the dialogue is some of the best David Fincher has ever given us. Next up is Good Will Hunting. This is directed by Gus Van Sant, starring Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, written by Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, but the highlight of this movie is Robin Williams, my absolute favorite performance from him. This is just... It's just a good movie. Obviously, it's a good movie on a technical level, but it's full of goodness and this heartfelt emotion that you just don't get every day. And it's all about this guy who is an absolute genius, but he chooses to work as a janitor at MIT. All of a sudden, he decides to solve a very difficult math problem, and people discover that he is brilliant. And the relationship between he and Robin Williams is one of those that I will never forget. I still haven't forgotten since the first time I watched this movie. Now, the problem with the movies on the bottom of this list, and I say the bottom, they're still my favorite movies of all time. Fight Club, Good Will Hunting. Maybe I haven't watched them as many times as I should have to prepare for this list. But I feel like the more I watch Good Will Hunting, the more I will fall in love with the characters. It's just a brilliant movie, and I think for what it was going for, especially for the time, right? And that's the reason why I read the premise, because not everyone has watched Good Will Hunting. If you haven't seen it, seek it out, especially if you love Robin Williams. But I think it's almost a perfect movie for what it's going for. And the way it leaves you, just that feeling in your heart, I'm just like, so good. Then we have Back to the Future. I love this movie. I really do. Austin, why is it down at 28? Well, there are just other movies I go back to and revisit more. I maybe don't have the urge to revisit this as much as someone who got to see this movie in the theater when it was out, right? Obviously, I was born in 1995, so this isn't one that I grew up with seeing that in the theater for the first time, but my parents did have it on VHS. We watched it multiple times. I enjoy this trilogy as a whole, really, but it really focuses on this first movie and the relationship between Marty and Doc, and just the fact that it handles these sci-fi tropes, and it knows it's full of sci-fi tropes. It knows that it can't necessarily explain everything about it, but that doesn't bother me as much. If a film captures the essence that it's going for, just this fun, entertaining nature, then stuff like that you'll see with other movies on this list, it really doesn't bother me. And Back to the Future is just fun. And it's just one of those things you can't explain. It captures the time period so well. And even if you're watching this movie for the first time, I feel like everyone will have this sense of nostalgia for it because everyone always talks about Back to the Future. But then when you're watching it, you're feeling something that you've never really felt from any other movie. And that's the testament of a brilliant film. And I think Back to the Future is just amazing. Then we have my favorite Spielberg film, that is Saving Private Ryan. Now, you're going to ask yourself, Austin, why weren't there very many Steven Spielberg movies on this list? Well, I have a top 100, and a lot of them are in the top 100. You have your Jurassic Parks, you have your E.T.s, you have your Jaws. But those aren't necessarily films that I have this base of nostalgia for that others have, right? Maybe a little bit Jurassic Park, but I'm looking at a movie like Saving Private Ryan, and the first time I watched this film, and I have an affinity for war movies. I'm surprised there aren't more on this or yesterday's list, but I love them, right? Even if some of them are a bit sloppy, I still have a good time. But Saving Private Ryan is, I think, the prime example of how you handle a narrative like this, and how you give us a hero in Tom Hanks' character. Well, and Matt Damon's character, and multiple characters that you're rooting for. And then when some of them are taken away from us, you have the most dramatic and heartfelt death scenes, I believe, of all time. One in particular, and you guys know what I'm talking about. But just the beginning of this movie, the way that Spielberg handled this film, I feel like, Schindler's List aside, I feel like this is his best directing job, just capturing the essence of what a war movie should be. So Saving Private Ryan, in my opinion, is brilliant. I know some people have problems with the third act. I love everything about this movie, and that's why it's on this list. Austin, you already got a 2018 movie on this list. What are you doing? Well, it's recent, and there are going to be some more recent movies on this list, but I know when I feel a very specific way about a movie, and I know recency bias, you can take that into account, but I've seen these movies so many times. I don't have that anymore. I've seen Spiderverse at least 7, 8 times, and I love it. Every time I watch it, I love it. It's my favorite Spider-Man movie. It does every character, I was going to say the character, but every character justice, from Miles to Peter to Gwen, and it's just, it's brilliant in the way it handles so many superheroes, the same superhero, but so many different iterations of Spider-Man, but it allows you to care about each one of them. Maybe one or two don't get their justice, don't get their due like the others, but the story is great. The Spider-Verse concept is great. The flipping of certain characters like a Doc Ock is really cool, and the art style. And if you go and you look at the behind the scenes and what they put into this movie, you get a lot out of it. Asking, you don't have a lot of Scorsese. What's going on? Well, a lot of Scorsese's films I watched more recently for the first time, or really was able to soak them in, right? Growing up, I never really watched his movies. One, because my parents wouldn't let me, and two, it just wasn't the director that I saw myself gravitating towards. Then I started to watch them, then I started to fall in love, and Goodfellas is the one, the definitive Scorsese movie that I look at and I say, it doesn't matter if I watched it for the first time 5 or 6 years ago. It resonated with me in such a way. And you're going to see multiple films like that on this list where even when you watch them, you're halfway through for the first time and you hear so many things about them, like this is a classic. This is one that a lot of people will look at and learn from as a movie, as an experience. Goodfellas is one of those movies. It is an epic beyond all belief. Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Liotta's journey through this giant, crazy, insane group of people. It is the ultimate mob story, in my opinion. Just how the film starts out and we circle around to the end, and it's almost poetic in nature. And this is, I believe, Scorsese's best directing job. I love Martin Scorsese as a director, but Goodfellas, there's something about it that resonates with me and stand above the rest. And that's an impressive feat. I'm going to speed this up just a tad bit. Next up is Prisoners. I believe Hugh Jackman's best performance. Jake Gyllenhaal is phenomenal. Denis Villeneuve, it's a trend you're going to see on this list, but the heartbreak and the emotion that Jackson's character feels after his daughter and Terrence Howard's daughter are taken from them, and the search to find out who did it, why would they do it, what's the reasoning behind this, and then Gyllenhaal's role in trying to keep everyone sane, but also trying to solve this case himself. But the real standout is Denis Villeneuve's direction. This is when I first watched one of Villeneuve's movies, and I said, there's something special about this director. And you'll see I'm clearly a massive fan of him. He is my favorite director working today. If you missed that video, spoiler alert. But Prisoners, I believe, is an all-time classic in my book, and it does everything right. Austin, where's the classics? Well, we're going back all the way to 1957, and we're talking 12 Angry Men, a movie starring Henry Fonda. And this is such a simple but effective and brilliant premise. You have 12 people on a jury who are trying to figure out whether someone is guilty for murder or not. It's very simple. The entire movie, for the most part, takes place in one location. It all comes down to the dialogue between the characters, how they respond to each other, and how the tide slowly starts to shift and turn. And I watched this recently for, I believe, the third time the other day. The first time I watched it, I was in a film studies class in college, slowly trying to get my degree, and it just blew me away with how effective this movie was. 12 Angry Men. I feel like the more I watch it, the more I'm going to love it. If you guys haven't seen this classic, this is the one that I say go back and check it. Well, it's black and white. It's old. Doesn't matter. It's fantastic. And another classic. I don't have to speak to how well done The Shawshank Redemption is. It's one of those movies that just, it strikes you in such a way every single time you watch it. The performances are so good. Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman. But this is one that I have a lot of nostalgia for as well, because my father and I, we've watched it multiple times together. Every time it was on TV growing up, he would watch it. It's his favorite movie of all time. So that honestly kind of pushes it up my list, but I also have this affinity for this movie, this love. During this epic, I'm sitting down thinking, how could someone construct a movie this emotional and this inspiring for a young filmmaker to see this and see how this was done? And just The Shawshank Redemption, in my opinion, does everything right. It gets its point across, and it's almost the perfect movie. But then we have Damien Chazelle, La La Land. I know. Listen, I'm not a musical guy, right? Before this movie, I said, musicals. And then while watching this movie, I was going, musicals. And now I say musicals. Because, well, none of them have really lived up to La La Land since then, but it's such a good movie. What Damien Chazelle was able to do with this premise, and then, of course, you have the performances and Gosling and Stone, and I know a lot of people take issue with the fact that, it's just two people in Los Angeles, this and that, but it's about the relationship and the romance and the story. It swept me off my feet. I watched this for the first time by myself in between two couples. It was awkward, but it was a great theatrical experience. I cried. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. 2007, Paul Thomas Anderson, There Will Be Blood. Some of these movies are on this list because I love them, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. Some of these movies are on this list because I love them, but I can also acknowledge that it's one of the most brilliant movies ever constructed, and I believe that to be the case for There Will Be Blood. If I was doing a top 10 best movies of all time, I may consider putting this on that list. That's right, above a lot of these older films that are considered classics, because the way this movie is constructed and Paul Thomas Anderson's direction, possibly some of the best I've ever seen. Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in this film, I drink your milkshake. I can't do that justice. No one can. But it's really the discovery of Paul Dano and playing two characters, but one in Eli, that just, it gives you this experience, their relationship and where it ends up. And then you look at the wide shots and the lack of score, and then when the score builds up and it comes in, it's effective, and just the visuals. There Will Be Blood. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Superhero movies. Austin. I know. I'll get the comments. I expect them. I welcome them with open arms. But listen, I had an affinity and affection for these characters prior to them coming on screen, right? You grow up with comic books. You're going to be excited when you start getting comic book movies. That's the way that the world works. If you didn't grow up with comic books, I think a lot of people will get invested through these movies, but some, it's just not their thing, and that's fine. That's why these are my favorite movies. And I do think it's different when you have a novel without pictures, so you don't have an idea of what the characters look like, and then you have a comic with pictures, so when you see these characters jump from that page to the screen, and they look similar, and they feel as if you expect them to feel, it works. And Endgame, combining everything I love about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and sure, Infinity War does that as well. I talked about that movie yesterday in my honorable mentions. But this film just had everything for me. It had a first act that recapped what it gave you in Infinity War. It allowed you to grieve over these characters. It had a second act, which was full-on Back to the Future time travel, and it was so much fun going back through these other movies. Thor: The Dark World, I never thought I'd appreciate that film. And then the third act, is just this giant epic battle with all of the characters I used to read about. Look, I'm not saying Endgame is the perfect movie. If we were doing greatest films of all time, no, this wouldn't be on this list. But that's not what this list is. These are movies that mean the most to me. The experience combined with these characters, combined with the love that I have for them on screen, and then, of course, the third act, and I can't think of it. Let's just go to the next one. Toy Story, it's the ultimate example of a movie that I grew up with. I honestly probably watched Toy Story 2 a tad bit more than this one, but I think I appreciate this story and the style and the structure of it more, and the relationship, the beginning of the relationship between Woody and Buzz. One of the most iconic buddy films, if you want to think about it like that. But it's also just expertly crafted. It really is. It's a story about hope. It's a story about believing in yourself, and Buzz Lightyear finding out who he really is, and Woody finally accepting that someone, maybe hasn't taken his place, but is slowly going in that direction. It's just, oh my gosh, it's awesome. The idea of toys coming to life, it freaks you out, but it's so good. Toy Story is phenomenal. Oh no, recency bias. Here we go again. I don't care. 1917 is my favorite war movie of all time, and I can already smell it. I can already see it happening. It is a very recent movie, but I've already seen it enough to convince myself that this is a movie that combines everything I love about war movies. It's a one take. I love a good one take. The whole freaking movie's one take. But then you have the style and the score and the way that the film progresses, and the acting is something that hardly anyone talks about. And then my dad called me, back to my dad. He called me the other day and said, you know what? Might be my favorite war movie of all time. He watched it. He loved it. I'm so happy to say that. All of my friends that have watched this movie has called me right after because they know how I feel about this movie, and they're like, yep. And so far, I haven't had any super negatives. Now, I've seen some negativity online. That's okay. This movie isn't for everyone. But for me, it's everything I've ever wanted. Sam Mendes, congratulations. Talk about an experience, man. Denis Villeneuve, what he managed to do with Blade Runner 2049, it's something that, heightened my respect for the first. And I'm not like the world's biggest fan of the first. I think it's fine for what it was doing. But I think this far exceeds that. It combines beautiful technical aspects with some brilliant direction from Villeneuve. I love the score. I know it's loud and obnoxious, but I like a good score like that. Hans Zimmer. But then you have Gosling's performance. And what Harrison Ford does in this movie, recapturing what we loved about his character in the first film, the story progression, and the emotion in that final scene. It's long, but it's phenomenal. Blade Runner 2049, one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time. Talk about nostalgia, man. Talk about nostalgia. The Incredibles. I was so pumped when I first saw this trailer. I was so pumped when I knew this was going to play out in the same way of a Fantastic Four, but I didn't know how good or effective it would be. And then you have Syndrome, and then you have just the love for these characters and how it came back so many years later with the sequel. But it all started with the first movie. Pixar is doing it right. They handled this superhero movie better than a lot of these superhero studios, better than these studios that put all of their efforts into this. And obviously they put a lot of effort into The Incredibles. But the way it's resonated with people and just stuck with us over the years, and the fact that I've watched this like 30 times, that could do it. What a day. What a lovely day. George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road. I was obsessed with this movie when it first came out. It's all I could talk about. Now, I will admit, the first time I watched it, I didn't like it as much as I do now. I loved it, but I'm like, it's just so crazy. I don't even know if I can handle it. And that's how multiple friends that I had felt coming out of the theater. They're like, Austin, this is just too crazy for me. It is crazy, but it's the perfect representation of what apocalypse should be like. But it's also the encapsulation of madness. And even Tom Hardy, how calm and collected he is through most of this movie, it is a slow descent into madness for him. The real standout is Charlize Theron. Nicholas Hoult is great, and it's the stunt work, the fight choreography, and the way that this movie looks, the color correction, some of the best I've ever seen. Mad Max Fury Road is crazy, but it is epic. But Austin, didn't you just do your Marvel list, and Winter Soldier was below Endgame? I thought about it. I rewatched them both, and I just have this love for Winter Soldier that many others may not share, at least to this degree. Like, it's such a standout. It's everything I wanted in a spy espionage movie. And then you have Captain America at the forefront. And, oh, okay, this is a superhero film. This is not that, but it is that. It's a combination of the two. And this is when the MCU, for me, really started to turn the tide. And not that what came before it was bad, but these movies started to stand out after this. And The Winter Soldier is a combination of everything I love about movies, and it put Captain America at the forefront of my favorite superheroes of all time on screen. It allowed me to love him like I love him today. The Russo brothers' direction, the music, I think the music is incredible, and both villains are a standout in this film. And sure, some will say the third act isn't the best third act in a Marvel film, but I feel the emotion every time I watched it, and I've watched this far more than any other Marvel movie yet. I love this character, and this is the reason why. Then we have Sing Street. Austin, what in the world is Sing Street? Directed by John Carney. This is possibly the best coming-of-age story during modern times that I've ever seen. It encapsulates everything that I love. I love about growing up. You have relationships, you have friendships, you have family, and you guys know me. I love a good brotherly story. This is the ultimate brotherly story. And the acting is incredible, this and that, but Jack Rayner's performance as the older brother who kind of points his brother, Ferdia Walsh-Pilo's character, in a direction that breaks your heart, but it also makes you so happy. The ending of Sing Street is possibly my favorite ending of all time. The music is incredible. Drive It Like You Stole It. The rhythm of the model. Everything is so good. And I know I'm speaking a foreign language to people who haven't seen this movie. Seek out Sing Street. Watch it, and prepare to have your eyes fill with tears. You know, I've always been a Wolverine fan, and I've always been a fan of what they were doing with the X-Men movies. I love Days of Future Past. I love First Class. But Logan is the standout, and I believe it was the conclusion of the previously modern X-Men universe, because it was handled so well. James Mangold is such a good director. I give him a pass for the Wolverine because he has Ford v Ferrari, because he has this, because he has... He's consistently done it, but he puts all of this artistic and independent movie effort into a movie like Logan and turns it into a Western and turns it into a character study and turns it into a man who is suffering and dealing with old age and the fact that he's just not the man that he used to be, and then it's Wolverine. So you get the violence and the R rating, and it's, in my opinion, one of the greatest superhero movies ever made, but it doesn't feel like a superhero movie. But for a lot of people, that's the best way you can possibly do it. And Logan is a standout for a reason. Fight Club is amazing, but The Social Network is my favorite David Fincher movie of all time. I talked about the script a bit earlier. I think this is his best screenplay. It's a movie that works from the dialogue alone. The script is integral. The way that it plays out is epic. And it's just a story about how Facebook was created. That's it. That's all it is. But no, it's much more than that. It's about the conflict behind it. It's about breaking hearts, making enemies. It even says that in the trailer. Jesse Eisenberg and Andrew Garfield's relationship and their chemistry. And then you have Justin Timberlake. What? And he comes in and plays a good part, and everyone in this movie is just firing on all cylinders. The way that they spout out the dialogue and the construction of the story and the music in the background. It's such a tight screenplay, man, and not everyone believes this to be the best David Fincher movie, but in my opinion, it did everything it needed to do to resonate with me, and it hit me so hard, and this is what got me excited about writing a screenplay. It was this movie. The ultimate Denis Villeneuve experience. 2016 was a good year. It was La La Land, then it was Sing Street, and now Arrival is my favorite movie of 2016. See, the longer you sit with a movie, the more it could raise on your particular lists, and I've had 4 years to think about Arrival, think about its impact, and I just think it is one of the most brilliant and smart sci-fi movies I've ever seen. The way that it handles time travel is so distinct from other films. It is my favorite Amy Adams performance. I think it was my favorite performance of that year. The fact that she didn't get any Oscar love for it, I'm just like, whatever. But you have the score by Johan Johansson, and rest in peace, my goodness, what a brilliant composer. You also have some of the greatest cinematography I've ever seen in a sci-fi film. Denis Villeneuve's epic nature of storytelling, but it's also subtle at the same time, the way this film plays out and the emotion behind it. It continues to get better. I think it is almost a perfect sci-fi film. You know, we had to talk the Coen brothers at some point. This is No Country for Old Men, the same year as There Will Be Blood, but I actually prefer No Country. I think in terms of quality, you could easily go the other direction, but No Country it hit me like a hit me like a ton of bricks and shook me like a dog. I have Tommy Lee Jones as one of my favorite performances of that year. Then you have Josh Brolin, who is a great protagonist, but it's Javier Bardem. I mean, one of the greatest villains. Like, I put him up there with Heath Ledger. And you guys know how much I love Heath Ledger as the Joker. The fact that this movie is without any music, any score except for the beginning and the end, and the way it plays out, and the way that it shifts perspectives. And a lot of people complain about the ending. I completely understand, but it all comes down to how you receive it, how you think about it, how you interpret it. Those are the best endings, in my opinion. No Country for Old Men, my favorite Western of all time. Michael Gondry's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, my favorite Jim Carrey performance of all time. Almost put Dumb and Dumber in my honorable mentions yesterday. I'm a big Ace Ventura fan as well, but this isn't comedy. This is pure emotion. This is a guy who wants to go back and erase the memories of the girl that he used to and still loves, but then he decides, maybe I don't want to do that, so he's slowly going back through his memories, trying to protect her and protect his love for her. And I understand, some people watch this movie and say, I don't know what's going on, but the more you watch it, the more you will appreciate it, even if you don't find the love and affection that I have for it. I think it's the greatest love story within a movie that I've ever seen, and I think it is by far Carrey's best performance. I love Jim Carrey, one of my favorite actors, but this took me in a whole new direction. I'm like, this guy can do it. It's so underappreciated. At the time, it wasn't received as well, but now people are starting to come back around on it, and I think it is brilliant. I love this film. Another reason why I love Damien Chazelle, Whiplash is brilliant. I'm not even like a huge music guy, especially not a huge jazz guy, but I watch this film and I see a man in Miles Teller's character who just wants to be the greatest. He wants to be the best, and he's willing to do anything to get to that, but he also has to deal with J.K. Simmons, and J.K. Simmons' performance is possibly my favorite supporting actor performance of all time. It's that and Heath Ledger and Javier Bardem. Look, we've talked about all of them, but it is just brilliant how he handles and how he treats this character and their relationship, and then the way that this film ends, that entire 10-15 minute sequence, probably even longer than that, but you're mesmerized by the music and everything that has been building up for this entire movie. You get that payoff, and it's the direction from Damien Chazelle. It's a brilliant movie. It's an experience, one of the best independent movies, I believe, ever made. Y'all know Christopher Nolan. I have a love for this man and the way that he directs a film, but Inception is one of the coolest and most original and most impressive blockbusters I've ever seen. Now, my biggest issue with this movie is the fact that there is a bit too much exposition, but then I look at how this would be the most confusing thing on the face of the earth if there was no exposition. So that is my only nitpick with this film. I think the way that it plays out is awesome. I love Cobb, played by Leo, who gives an Oscar-worthy performance in a movie like Inception, but you look at the supporting cast, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, Nolan, bringing us into this story, telling us how these dreams work, putting us in levels upon levels upon levels, and each level giving us an impressive set piece with really great music. It's like each dream that they go into is a blockbuster in itself. So you have multiple blockbusters piling up, creating the ultimate experience in Inception. And Inception is one of those movies I've watched 8 to 10 times trying to figure out the ending. I still don't know if I have my answer. But those are the best endings. I keep saying that. You guys know me. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Don't love talking Star Wars on my channel nowadays because of things, but Empire Strikes Back is the OG. It's the one that, it didn't start it all, but it's the one that took the franchise in the direction that I don't think a lot of people expected. See, at the time, this wasn't as impactful as it is nowadays. People didn't know that that twist would hit them in the way that it hit them, and it's all about how a movie ages, and I believe Empire has aged so well. Obviously, the set pieces are great. Lucas's story is awesome. Kirshner's direction is really, really good. I'm really surprised that I haven't heard his name more in the directing world. But Empire Strikes Back is what it is for a reason. I am your father, the quotable lines, the memorable characters, the design for some of these characters is phenomenal. And then you have some of the best battles in Star Wars. So it's everything we love about Star Wars. If you don't love Star Wars, you're not going to love this movie on this level. If you do love Star Wars, this is probably 1 or 2 on your list. It's just the way it is.
Lord of the Rings,
Return of the King. It is just so phenomenal with how it handles its characters. It is the culmination of everything we love about, in my opinion, the greatest trilogy of all time. Multiple finales. It fades to black maybe one too many times, but hey, it is just perfect. I think it is the perfect fantasy movie. We will never see anything else on this level. There's a reason why fantasy movies just aren't doing it for us nowadays, because we always make the comparison to Lord of the Rings, and this epic finale combining everything we've loved about the franchise to this point with the great characters. The send-offs are beautiful. The relationship between Sam and Frodo. Sam, ultimate hero. You guys know how much I love Lord of the Rings, but Return of the King is brilliant. There's a reason why it won so many Oscars. And once again, it's not going to be everyone's favorite in the trilogy, but the fact that this trilogy is that good, everyone's going to have their favorite movie. This one's mine. I think this one's going to be the shock of the century for a lot of you guys. I think this one is going to blow you away, and some of you maybe haven't even watched Ferris Bueller. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is the ultimate coming-of-age story. It is my favorite movie of the 80s. It is John Hughes at his John Hughesiest. Is that a word? Not really. But Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller is possibly my greatest comedic performance of all time. He breaks the wall before Deadpool did. He is as smooth as any character as I've ever seen in a movie. He gets away with everything. He's so sly. He's so incredible. But it's his friendships with Cameron and Sloane. It's his relationships. And Ed Rooney's quest to take down Ferris Bueller is possibly the most entertaining thing I've ever seen in an 80s movie. So it's hilarious. It's awesome. It's epic. It's grand. The parade scene is one of my favorites of all time. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is one that I have watched 40, 45, 50 times. It's embarrassing. I was going to do one of those swerves where you put like Batman and Robin. I start talking about it for 20 seconds. But one, I've talked too long. And two, look at my wall. It's full of Batman and the Joker. Like, obviously, Batman is my favorite superhero, like, overall. Maybe not my favorite on-screen superhero. But I have this love for him. And then when this movie came out, I thought, how could they do Batman and the Joker justice? How could they do it better than the 89 Batman? Because I really enjoyed that movie as well. But Heath Ledger, man. Heath Ledger. It's just the best. He's the best villain. It is the ultimate impressive, epic superhero achievement that we've ever seen, and I don't know if it'll ever be topped. Like, I thought Logan was going to get close. I thought Endgame was going to get close. I thought Winter Soldier was going to get close. But nothing has topped this. Maybe the new Batman movie from Matt Reeves will do that, but this is the perfect combination of taking a superhero story, placing it in the real world. I think the common critique is that Gotham wasn't portrayed as well as Gotham is in the comics, but it's in the real world. Not everyone loves the Two-Face storyline. I love the Two-Face storyline. I love the way that he plays into the movie. Sure, he doesn't have a role as big as Joker's in terms of a villain, but he works for what the story is. I just think this story is perfect, and I think Christian Bale gets overlooked because of Heath Ledger, but I still think Christian Bale is phenomenal in this movie. The Dark Knight, my favorite movie of all time. It's going to be hard to top this. 2008, 13-year-old Austin watching two of his favorite characters go back and forth on screen. You watch it 12 years later, it still holds up. It's still, in my opinion, the best comic book movie of all time. But number one, The Dark Knight. So if you guys enjoyed this video, like I said, hit the thumbs up button. Let me know. We will continue this series of favorites and greats. And maybe, just maybe, I will get these movies together and look through them and determine which movies are the greatest. That's when you start throwing in the Godfathers and this and that. But the reason those movies were on this list, because these are the films that resonate with me, that have this personal touch. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's the other thing. But I appreciate you guys for watching. This was so much fun to do. I know I've been building it up for quite some time. I need your comments and your lists below, and let me know, what would you like to see next. I'll see you guys soon.